Welcome to Synod Education, Friday afternoon, January 26th at 1. We are hopefully, my plan is to move us along so we can leave by 3:30. We're starting S284 and activating the use of electronic devices in digital and online products in schools. This bill was sponsored by Senator Williams and others. And wondering, Senator Williams, you just want to just tell us a little bit about why you put the bill in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Actually, it's a grassroots group of constituents in my district that asked me to do it. And basically, it's an act relating to electronic devices and digital online products in school. And the purpose is a prevention policy that aims to improve the environment of schools to promote mental health and wellness. There's no financial cost to this. There's no money attached to it. But we believe that prevention measures will indeed save money for mental health and wellness. The goal is fully phone-free schools, pre-K through high school. Obviously, the high schoolers are going to be a little more difficult to, because they've already been accustomed to having them. But both public and private schools, and no phones during class, not in lunch, and not in the hallways transition or on the bus. So it's a fully phone-free for the entire day. Policy, it's going to be a policy that says the phones can either be left at home, secured in a phone-specific locker. They do make those lockers where students will not have access until they leave the campus. The phone lockers could be in homeroom or in the admin office. Secure phone pouches are commercially available, and but the goal is that not accessible in a secure pouch would be the only way the student could have it on their person. There will be an exception to this though. Students with medical needs, such as diabetic monitoring, if provided a medical doctor or nurse practitioner would certify this exception, the same way that school is informed if the student has medications. So that's basically the bill.
That's a terrific overview. Thank you. Ms. St. James,
Yes, hello.
how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Fine. So we have the bill in front of us. If you would be so kind as to take us through it.
Absolutely. So this Beth St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, this is S284, an act relating to the use of electronic devices in digital and online products in schools. The bill starts with a findings section. Do you want me to go over those findings or move on to the substance?
I think looks like there are how many? So there are all sorts of reasons around the concerns with mental health, etc. I think we can read through the findings on our own. And just so the committee knows, we have two senators and others who are in another committee. We're wrapping up school construction today. So if you're zooming in, just know that Senator Dulick and Senator Weeks are not on holiday. They are working hard as usual. So why don't we start with the bill itself and pass over.
Great. So that puts us on page 4 at the very top. And what this bill proposes to do is to add all brand new language to Title 16 in Chapter 9, which is the school district chapter. And it actually creates a whole brand new subchapter related to this issue entitled Digital Products and Social Media. So it starts by adding section 600 to Chapter 9. And 600 is the definition section. So I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read every definition verbatim, but I am going to clue you into some of them that I think are important to have an understanding of as we walk through the rest of the bill. And as always, you can stop me and ask me to go over something that I've skipped.
Great.
So digital or online products, we're going to start with the first definition there. It means any platform or service that can be utilized on an electronic device and connects to the internet. There's a definition for educational data. that I am going to skip over, and I'm going to go right to electronic device. So any device that transmits sounds, images, text messages, videos, or electronic information, electronically records, plays, or stores information, or accesses the internet or private communication or information networks. The term independently funded research is defined as evidence-based research not funded by commercial interests that would lead to a real or perceived bias. And then non-digital teaching methods and instructional materials means educational materials that are composed of printed paper or printed books, writing that utilizes graphite pencils and ink pens, and in-person teaching. And then online, I'm on page 5 now, line 3, online or digital services provider. It means any person or entity that contracts with a supervisory union, school district, public school, independent school, career and technical education center, or pre-qualified private kindergarten provider as part of a one digital service to one student program to provide technological devices for students to use or to provide access to a software or online application, and it creates, receives, or maintains educational data pursuant to a contract with a school provider. Parent is going to include the legal guardians who are legally authorized to make education decisions for the students. And I think the biggest definition for understanding the rest of the bill is school. School for this subchapter means any public school, independent school, career and technical center, or pre-qualified private kindergarten provider located in Vermont. So when you see the term school in this bill, it encompasses all of those different types of educational environments. And then social media, I think, will be the last definition that we should look at here. It means the use of web-based and mobile technologies to communicate through interactive dialogue. Social media includes social media platforms, blogs, picture sharing vlogs, internet application wall postings, instant and direct messaging, music sharing, crowdsourcing, voice over IP, communications through video games, and any successor protocol to transit information. And then the definition for student is just a student who's registered in a school located in Vermont. So then we're on page 6 now, line 5, section 601, personal electronic devices. This section requires each governing body of a school, so whether that's a school board, the governing body of an independent school, or a pre-qualified pre-K provider, to develop, adopt, and ensure implementation of a policy that prohibits use of smartphones, smart devices, and cellular phones while students are physically located on school property or while under the supervision of and control of an employee of the school district, school, or program. The policy may prohibit a student from bringing a personal electronic device to school, require personal electronic devices to be placed in a designated area on school property, or allow for utilization of a product that functions to secure the personal electronic device, such as a device locker or a lockable pouch. So the policy, so everyone's required to have the policy, and the policy has to prohibit the use of smartphones, but then there's discretion on whether the phone can actually be brought to school or not. Page 6, subsection B, is the exemption that Senator Williams mentioned. So if a student, the policy has to have an exemption for students to possess and use a personal electronic device if a licensed physician or licensed advanced practice registered nurse determines that use of the personal electronic device is necessary for the student. The policy might require documentation to prove that, and then any medical use exception still has to prohibit use of a personal electronic device for non-medical purposes. So there are many apps out there. I'm thinking for one, diabetes, where blood sugar checks are done kind of automatically on their phones. That would be one example of a medical exception here. Page 7, we're in a new statute now, section 602, prohibition of integration of social media platforms into education. So this statute is going to prohibit basically the use of social media for communication with students or with parents or community. So it would prohibit, and this is not a policy, this is just the law. You are telling schools that they cannot do these things. So they cannot utilize social media for communication with students directly or indirectly. They cannot allow students access to social media while students on school property or under the supervision and control of a school employee. And they cannot allow students to access social media on school-issued electronic devices or permit students and teachers to use social media for school activities, out of school academic work, homework, school sports, extracurricular clubs, or any other school-sponsored activities. The schools have to have measures in place to prevent students from accessing social media on school-issued electronic devices. And the schools themselves are prohibited from using social media to communicate with anyone. And then going on to page 8, this bill lists the ways that schools can use communication in lieu of social media. So they could have in-person assembly, in-person meetings, paper communications, phone calls, email, and they could use the school's public-facing website, just not social media. Page 8, line 7 is another statute, 603, electronic device, internet use, and digital and online opt-out. So subsection A requires, again, we're back to a policy requirement. So each governing body of the different types of educational environments are required to adopt a policy that provides students the option to opt out of electronic device use, internet use, and digital and online product use, including the option of opting out of the use of school computers and other digital and online products. And then the policy has to include several different options. So the first option would be the option to partially opt out of the use of personal and school-issued electronic devices, including no access to the school district network and website and no access to applications and services provided by the school district to support curriculum, including certain products. We're on page 9 now. The policy has to include the option to opt out of any program or activity that allows a curriculum, test, or assessment from an online or digital service provider to have access to a student's educational or personal data. The policy has to have an option to opt out of the use of any product that school administration utilizes that accesses or retains a student's educational or personal data, provided that the policy shall not allow the option to opt out of the use of products used by school administration to access or retain educational or personal data that is required to be collected by state or federal law. A lot of, as you all know, a lot of what AOE, the information that AOE collects is done electronically, and then AOE actually has certain dashboards on its website where some of that data is available for public consumption. So this policy would allow that practice to continue. And then the last option that the policy needs to include is an alternative instruction method through which a student that is opted out under any provision of the section may learn and be assessed on material required by the school without being deprived of equal access to education and advancement. Schools are required to have non-digital options if they have contracts with educational services or curriculum that provide digital component. The school is required to have a non-digital option for every class offered, irrespective of the current status of any opt-outs. So they don't have to wait for a student to opt out of the digital option. They have to be ready with the non-digital option. Schools shall not penalize or withhold educational benefit from a student who opts out of any program or activity as detailed in this section. We're on page 10. The policy also has to require schools to provide students who have opted out under this section an opportunity to learn, so educational benefits, without any observed distraction of digital products. This may be achieved by having physical parameters to prevent a student who has opted out under this section from having sight of a device. No student shall be discriminated against or penalized if the student opts out as authorized under this section. And teachers who opt out of digital product use and use a fully non-digital curriculum shall have the right to do so without retaliation or discrimination. And then the last pieces here in this section are about enforcement of this policy. So the policy has to include a complaint process and enforcement process if a parent believes the school is in violation of the opt-out policy. Complaints are first determined by the school board or the governing body of the independent school or pre-K provider. And if the school or parent is unsatisfied with the decision of the governing body, the decision may be appealed to the Secretary of Education. And this bill also creates a private right of action. We don't see this often, so if you have questions, just let me know. But if a school district fails to comply with this section, a parent whose student has been denied the options required under this section may bring an action in the civil division of the Superior Court for damages, injunctive relief, punitive damages in the case of intentional violation of the section, and reasonable costs and attorney's fees. And the last section, other than the effective date, page 11, section 604, line 3, is electronic device safety education. So the Secretary of Education is required to develop an electronic device and online safety education curriculum for elementary and secondary schools that shall focus on the harms and risks related to electronic devices and online safety. And it has to be based on independently funded research and shall meet the educational needs of all students. The AOE is responsible for providing training programs for school personnel on electronic devices and online safety education. And each supervisory union or governing board of an independent school or pre-K provider shall include electronic devices and online safety education curriculum in its union-wide or school-wide curriculum and ensure implementation of the curriculum as required under their requirement to ensure implementation of curriculum in the supervisory union statute. And then each supervisory union shall coordinate with community resources to offer electronic devices and online safety education to parents and community stakeholders. And this bill would take effect on July 1, 2024.
Thank you. So there was a lot there, and I just want to make sure I'm clear about a couple of things. Are we saying, can teachers still use social media to teach? In other words, is this in any way preventing a teacher from tossing something up, using a YouTube video, using Zoom, anything like that?
It prohibits a teacher from using social media, and social media is defined as, if we go back to page 5, line 18, means the use of web-based and mobile technologies to communicate through interactive dialogue. So it includes media platforms, blogs, picture sharing blogs, internet application wall postings, instant direct messaging, music sharing, crowdsourcing, voice over IP, and communication through video games. I'm not sure YouTube would qualify here.
Sure, but I'm thinking if a teacher wanted to teach something about media literacy, they might not be able to toss something up from a blog or that kind of thing. Senator Sheen.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the 603, the opt-out section. So just want to make sure I'm understanding. So a student. So if a classroom is using social media, or a teacher is using social media to like play a video from YouTube, or use the Google Suite website, and there's a student who's opted out, and the teacher isn't able to provide the same or an equivalent lesson that doesn't use any of the electronics, the school district is now liable for a lawsuit?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move to our witness, who I believe was part of this grassroots effort, correct? Thanks, Ms. St. James. If you don't mind sticking around.
Absolutely.
And we have, I know I have the agenda. I just trying to find where. Ms. Derringer? I know I'm mispronouncing your name. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
So we have
So-
about 10 minutes before we move to our next witness. We're just starting this process, but we wanted to have you in to talk a little bit, say a few words about, again, what's in the bill and why you're interested in it.
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Laura Derringer for the record. I'm a public health nurse and currently a full-time parent to 4 school-age children. Really the reason that myself and other parents have came to Senator Williams and Senator Perchlik to write this is because we're addressing this matter of social media and digital products in a public health framework. So fundamentally, if we move forward with this legislation to support a school environment that's going to be healthier for students, it's really going to put Vermont in a place of leadership with reducing exposure to a product that we now know is considered by public health authorities as an environmental health toxin. So in May of 2023, the US Surgeon General issued an advisory saying that social media is not sufficiently safe for children to use. 42 attorney generals, including our own Vermont Attorney General, are suing social media companies for harms caused by the social media products. There are class action lawsuits against social media companies on behalf of parents whose children have died because of direct product exposure to these different social media products. And just this week, you might have seen that the New York Health Commissioner did declare social media a public health hazard. So while these products have become a norm, what the science is telling us now is that it's not a safe or a healthy norm, especially for our children. So when we are talking about the legislation in terms of minimizing a health exposure that is harmful to children, what can we do? This legislation does not have the word ban in it. It does not talk about before and after school. We're talking about we can make health policy the same way we can make sure there are clean air, clean water available to school. We want the environment to be a safe and healthy environment for children. So if the Surgeon General has said this is a product that's not safe for children, a very logical policy step would be that schools would stop using and endorsing products that our nation's chief doctor have said are not safe for use with children. So while it might be uncomfortable, and again, this is changing something that's become a norm. Again, we know that this is an unhealthy norm. We have swaths of research, and I provided that to you and your colleagues, the mountain of research showing that social media is indeed contributing to poor mental health in children. It's something that we can do something about for the school day. And for policy aspects such as saying that schools would stop using these products, it is absolutely possible for schools to achieve the communication that they need through means that are not inviting children down what ultimately does become a toxic rabbit hole. So posting the lacrosse tryouts or the library bake sale, or even, homework assignments or whatever on social media, that first step in and of itself can be seen as benign, but we know the algorithm harms, and perhaps that's something that could be updated with the definition. The algorithmic harms of the product design is able to basically override the adolescent's brain's ability to withstand, eventually ending up with toxic self-harm, explicit how-to suicide content, eating disorder content, online predators. We know actually next week on Wednesday, the CEOs of social media companies to the US Senate will be present to account for child sex abuse that's been happening on these online platforms. So again, this legislation takes an attempt to make a modest step to say, let's create a healthier school environment that does not support or endorse these products that right now are not safe for children. The rationale behind the opt-out is really important to discuss, because how student data is taken from children and misused and sold to third-party vendors is not a story that's very transparent or told or easily understood. And I'm not sure if Senator Williams has shared with you yet. We do have experts that are willing, that are computer scientists and lawyers in this space of student data privacy, to be able to fully explain to you how the misuse of student data really does harm children. So that is the foundation for why we're providing this opt-out. Right now, it's essentially a privilege to be able to opt out of having your child's data collected. And when we're talking about data that is being taken from children when they use the entire suite of these online products, such as the Google Classroom and the other products that we talk about. This is geographic location, the age, the number of logins, the religious affiliation, gender affiliation, family economic status, grades, test scores, behavioral records, mental health records, very sensitive information that really should be between the student, family, and school, and does not need to go further and be sold onto third-party vendors. The marketing of these companies tells us, don't worry, the data is de-identified. That's not true. The data is re-identified. So active profiles with all of that information with the child's name then continues to follow the child and is then passed along to educational institutions, insurances, HR firms, lending institutions. Again, we can bring people to explain this to you. This is fundamentally about children's civil rights to have their own privacy, and they should be able to go to school without having to leave their right to the privacy at the schoolhouse gate. Right now, we don't have functional federal laws that are protecting children from this. So this opt-out provision, just at a minimum, gives parents, especially the ones that can't opt out and go to a school, pay for a private school that, doesn't use these products, or opt out and homeschool. This allows parents that ability to be able to protect their child. Additionally, aside from the data privacy harms, we know more and more every month, there's more data that comes out that shows us that actually print-based reading and writing with a pen is superior to reading on a digital screen. So as our young children already in Vermont, we know, and across the country, are struggling to learn how to read, we are not helping them by making them sit in front of computer screens to achieve their basic, literacy and math education. Thirdly, there are health concerns. And again, we have physicians who can speak to you about the health harms that occur when children are exposed to these products. So I guess I want to just take any questions to clarify anything else moving forward. I'm sorry if I probably talked a little bit too much. This is a huge topic, and we did put maybe what's considered a lot in the legislation. Myself, as a public health nurse, I read the research and I say, what would a policy look like if we took the research and created a policy? So that's how we went about drafting this legislation. I'd say the lowest hanging fruit is obviously the first provision to make the schools cell phone free and social media free school environment. That's already happening. In 2 schools in Vermont have a very robust policy already in place that does reflect what our legislation would create as policy. And there are many schools across the country. So Vermont would just be the first place to put this explicit policy in place for the entire state.
Thank you. And Senator Williams and I have been talking pretty regularly about this. Next week, we're going to ask to hear from the AG's office, the Commissioner of Public Health, Mark Levine, and then the NEA and school folks that can tell us a little bit more about what they're seeing on the ground. And I think, I haven't confirmed this with Senator Williams, I will, but we're thinking maybe 1 p.m. next Friday for those conversations, to hear from, again, our public health commissioner, the attorney general's office, and schools as sort of the first folks that we would hear from in terms of testimony, and then we'd go from there. That's a pretty good lineup. Great. Any questions at this point? Good. Okay.
Thanks for your testimony.
Yeah, it was terrific. This is, you put something on our radar that, at least for me, is making me, more and more concerned the more I hear about it. And it's, there's some concerns I have with the bill, sure, that we'll continue to work on and understand and hear from, again, our health professionals and our attorney general and teachers and principals, et cetera. But I would more than welcome you to Zoom in next Friday as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you know how to track us down as we
Thank
make
you.
our
very-
process. Yeah, and Senator Williams, I know he has a list of witnesses, and depending on the committee's wishes next Friday, we can start going through those as well. Great,
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Does that sound, it's super, yeah, Attorney General or Sue Hartley
Mr.
instead.
Feldman has the testimony.
Has the checklist, okay, great. That work for you, NEA, also, just to connect next Friday, and just tell us a little bit also. What's happening out there? What are teachers' struggles? What schools, I don't know if you know any schools that have in Vermont that have said no.
Yeah.
And how it's going.
Yeah,
Anything like that would be great.
we'd be happy to speak to it, and our board has this topic, as Senator William knows, as an issue of concern in our legislative
Great.
agenda.
Great,
Great. I will just flag,
Yeah.
if I may,
Please.
Senator Ron Hinsdale has a bill that I just became aware of that I just want to make sure, as you continue this conversation, is perhaps complementary to it. It's around kid safe code. And I haven't gotten into it, but it seems complementary and
Great.
perhaps some way. So
And-
sort of flag that.
One thing I really wasn't thinking about, but am more now, is what are kids giving up when they are, well, what sort of some data are kids giving companies, et cetera, and is there a way to cut that,
You'll hear that.
making them more vulnerable to predator, all of that be a great step for us to take. And frankly, some work that we can do with health and welfare also. Who's the chair of the committee? Introduce me to her. Great. Okay, moving on. Catherine.
Hi.
Delana, Delnao? Delnao, that's right, good to see you again, we do know you.
too, yeah.
Good to see you. So Ms. Delnao, we are, we have a big library bill ahead of us.
Yes.
As you know. We're gonna continue on the library bill next week, and I don't know if you would be the person to help us with this, but it would be great to have 3 librarians in. Senator Williams has a librarian coming in, but 3 more librarians next week. I believe we're looking at the bill in detail. It is Wednesday at 1:30. And would you mind helping us with that?
Sure,
Anybody that you actually would think that would be helpful to weigh in on the bill, that's great. So if you think a public school librarian or a town librarian or an independent school.
one
Politics.
idea might be that, if you look, did you receive the materials?
We
that I
did,
sent over?
we did.
If you look at page 3 of the report, there are librarians listed here who were members of the working group, so they've heard from librarians around the state for the past 2+ years, and
Great.
many of them would be good folks to connect with. There's a mix of public, school, and academic librarians on the working group membership.
And they would be able to weigh in detail on S 220.
Yeah, and I also, guess, I believe that they would be able to, but also, I would think that the Vermont School Library Association and the Vermont Library Association have good contacts as
Great.
well. for you, and I can share the presidents of each of those organizations after.
That'd be great.
Today.
Yeah, if you would leave them with more, we're gonna work a little bit more on the agendas. Yeah, great.
And one question for you.
Please.
Today, I understand I'm giving an overview
Yeah.
of the report. I'm also able to provide the department's perspective on the bill, and I would enjoy the opportunity to do that, because there is quite a bit that relates to our department's work in S2 funding itself.
I would love that. We have until 2. It looks like you're going to get cut off. I'd rather have you come back and address the bill.
I would rather do it that way, so that
That'd be,
today
and it's
I'm
nice
giving
and
you.
clean.
Yeah, and I'm.
So
prepared
let's,
for
why
the
don't you come in
report today.
Tuesday also at Wednesday at
Wednesday.
1:30.
Okay.
We'll have you back in. That would be terrific.
And I'll do a lightning, with your permission, I'll do a lightning round of our.
We're all about
report.
lightning, but make sure you're not getting, don't let me, cut you too short.
Sure. So my name is Catherine Delnau. I'm the state librarian and the commissioner of the Department of Libraries, but I was also the chair of the working group on the status of libraries in Vermont. And I'm here to share an overview of our report, which I hope you've all had a chance to look at. We submitted it to the House and Senate Committees on Education on November 1st. Last year you saw me and I was asking for more time, but this year we managed to get it done. So
That's
it
why
was
it's so
complete.
wonderful, yeah.
Yeah. So if you'll think back to 2021, the bill was created through Act 66. And it was a huge scope, and that's why the lightning round today. We were charged with studying the status of libraries across Vermont, including academic, public, and school libraries in our state. On page 3, I mentioned you'll find the membership. It includes school librarians, library directors, the executive director of Vermont Humanities. We had a member of our group who is a librarian, but who works at the Vermont Folklife Center. So we have a really broad range of folks. And the 11-member group convened its first meeting in September 2021. And they were then under the leadership of our assistant state librarian, Tom McMurdo, who was in an interim role. When I joined the department in 2022, I took over as chair of the group. As I mentioned, the scope is really quite broad, and on page 4 of the handout, you can look at everything that we were charged with studying. And really, it was almost every aspect of library services in Vermont and in all of the different types of libraries. So it was a really interesting opportunity for us to benchmark where we are in the state with library services, what's going well, what needs a little bit more support, and how we were impacted in libraries by the COVID-19 emergency was a part of each of our topical focuses. We broke the work up into topical meetings, and if anyone in the committee is interested and has some time to spare, we actually have all of the recordings of our 5-hour sessions on each of the different topics, and we brought in experts from around the country, around the state,
Great.
local people, as well as national experts. And many of our meetings included reports from department staff. Our Department of Libraries has a team of consultants in different areas of expertise, and they looked at the statistical data that we already had to frame each of the topics before we heard anecdotal data from our library community and for Vermonters. So I need to apologize to you in advance. You know that the report is 220 pages in length. I want to explain what we would love for you to do. We don't expect anybody has time to really read it, although we've heard from some senators that they have. But there's a
I don't know how to
5-page.
confirm that.
I won't name names, but there's one senator walking around with a copy of it who really is excited. And there's a 5-page executive summary at the beginning of the report. I would focus your energies there to get a broad overview. There's then a 3 recommendations to the legislature that provides topical, sort of chunk into subject areas, the recommendations that we're making. If those topics are of interest to you and you want to know why did they recommend this, then you can go into the chapters that are arranged by different themes like library programming or facilities, and you can get a deeper dive then. We're librarians, so we wanted to meet the charge of being thorough and detailed and specific that we were given by the legislature, and so this was our approach. The report itself is about 220 pages, and then because as we were researching, we were finding lots of dead links in the world, we decided to also incorporate our an index into the report. that includes two studies that were done during this report. One of them is a study of broadband, and the second one is, I just saw you looking at it. The second one you can see on page 7 of the handout is a study that the Library Working Group commissioned related to public library staff compensation and salary survey. So that's an independent study. We used our per diems for this, and please notice in the BAA that we need to do a little bit of corrected accounting there. But we had well more than we needed for the per diems, and we found that we were not equipped to do this study ourselves, so we commissioned some independent folks who actually were former library directors here in Vermont. So amazing to find them through the regular bidding process.
This is online.
This is all online. We have it both in the legislative reports and then also on the Department of Libraries website. And we've been doing some explanatory informational sessions with different folks. I've met with the Vermont Library Association to explain it to them. And go through the report. I've met with, we had a session for library trustees and library directors because everybody in the community was really engaged throughout this process. And you can see on page 6, I mentioned we had 17 meetings and each of the meetings was about 5 hours long. We received written comments from 132 individuals and we've had spoken comments. So people who showed up and spoke with the group for 10 minutes and then had 5 minutes of questions and answers. And then we had expert reports. I believe that there were 25 expert reports. Those were a combination of people from national organizations, academics, librarians from around the state and the country, and also reports by members of our team in the Department of Libraries. Looking forward, I'd like to get over to the real meat of the report. On page 8, there's a slide that just says overarching themes. What we learned is that we all know that every Vermonter should have access to the benefits of the library. Statute tells us that. But the goal of providing equitable access to library services has yet to be met in our state. The one constant through line that we heard is that in Vermont, access to library services is extremely inconsistent. There are very different levels of funding for public libraries around the state, and those have led to gross inequities in library services, including the facilities, the library buildings themselves, the collections, the library books, the physical books, the online books, the other materials that they circulate, the databases, and also in library programming. It is extremely important that I point out that again and again, the working group heard from library staff and library trustees around the state that they want to provide their communities with the best service possible. That said, we also heard that many libraries simply lack the resources to meet the needs of their communities. So with that in mind, I'll move on to the recommendations, starting on page 9. The working group heard that the pricing structure and licensing of ebooks and e-audiobooks has librarians across the state concerned, because if you buy an ebook at your house for home use, you pay one amount of money. If we buy an ebook for library users, we're actually buying licensing rights for a limited number of circulations or a limited number of years. And so the cost becomes very difficult to maintain access to that book that is an electronic book or an electronic audio book. So
May I ask,
Yeah.
just for some clarification on ebooks, so I use Audible.
Right.
Is this something that that the library, is that the kind of technology you're
Yes.
talking about at this point? Is like an Audible,
Yeah.
making sure that people can access it?
absolutely.
For free.
So in our state, the Department of Libraries, to which you all are eligible for a library card,
Mhm.
so get yours. You can access ebooks and e-audiobooks through our Palace app, which is a platform that we provide for folks around the state. So that provides a baseline of ebooks and e-audiobooks. Independent libraries have actually been in the ebook and e-audio game since before we were. There's a library consortium that provides access to groups of librarians. There are actually multiple library consortia in the state. And then individual libraries subscribe to specific platforms. What's nice with our app, and I just will give it a little plug, is that it's content neutral. So if you could use our state library resources plus your local library resources plus a consortial resource all through one platform instead of needing all the different platforms. And what's nice about our resource is that the the resources are shared by everyone. So sometimes when you're going to look for an item on Audible, you might have actually been able to get it at your local library or from us. So what we're trying to do
free.
for free.
Which is, yeah,
Right, well, you've paid your taxes, which is wonderful, and
Yeah.
then we put them for these shared resources for all Vermonters.
sure.
And the libraries are being charged in a totally different manner from the general public. And so highlighting that and expressing that concern is important.
Mhm.
Because the cost of providing both the physical book for those who prefer the physical book or who need to use the physical book because they don't have internet access or they don't have a device. Then you also are trying to provide the same title in an ebook or an e-audio book. It's becoming expensive to buy all of the different formats to serve all of the different needs of Vermonters. So for that reason, the working group was recommending that legislation be considered to improve access to online resources. So we're trying to maintain and expand access to ebooks for Vermonters. That's really the goal. And looking at the pricing structure to see how could that be done was something that was beyond the scope of the working group, but we felt that the legislature should be aware that there is that need. We also have heard from a lot of librarians and community members that there is increasing political pressure related to the selection of library books and resources, and there are increasing challenges to materials and library collections. I've heard people say that there are no book bans in Vermont, there are no challenges in Vermont. I checked with my staff this morning. Last year, we helped 11 libraries respond to challenge books. It's not the case that there are no book bans that are being attempted in Vermont. If the case is that people are responding to them, the challenging of books is a normal day-to-day activity in libraries. And it's something that really we think of as having libraries are sort of a form of government, especially
Yeah.
the municipal libraries. People should have the right to petition their library. If they don't like something that's going on, they should be able to raise that. So the working group really looked at it in terms of what should libraries have to be well positioned if they get a challenge, which is a regular course of business happening much more frequently in a different tenor right now than it had been before. That was, for this reason, the libraries working group decided that what we would recommend was that public libraries, school libraries, academic libraries, every library have a collection development policy and that they have a reconsideration of materials policy. Those policies should be grounded not just in the First Amendment, which of course free speech is important, but also in our Vermont Public Accommodation Law and also in the Civil Rights Act. So really looking at it holistically, what are we trying to maintain and for whom are we trying to maintain it? Because we know that in this nation and in Vermont, we have had book challenges that have even been reported at the national level. They've risen to the level of getting reported to the American Library Association. When you see those reports from the American Library Association about when they got involved later. They didn't get involved the minute a parent came in with a concern about a book. Or today, the minute that somebody in a different state sent a flaming email, all caps and different fonts to our librarians in Rutland and Burlington and Worcester. Those challenges got dealt with at a small level. The fire was kind of extinguished at the lowest level. Often a challenge can be dealt with locally, and with support from maybe the Vermont Library Association, Vermont School Library Association. ALA is getting involved when it's rising to an even higher level. And in 2022, there were challenges reported by libraries in Vermont. I think that it was 5 libraries had 11 books challenged. But of course, I forgot the piece of paper that I printed that statistic out of, but I think that was the 2022 number. So we have a smaller number of books being challenged in Vermont, but we want to make sure people have continued access and that we're not impacted and that librarians continue to be able to do their work so that Vermonters continue to have access to books. And particularly the books being challenged are books that are written about or by LGBTQI individuals and also people of color. Those are the specific types of books across the nation, and in Vermont, it's not different, that are being targeted.
Do you find that if there's an opportunity just, there to have a conversation too, if somebody comes forward?
Absolutely, and that's,
Like you said, it's government, it's opportunity to chat, kind of figure
Yeah.
something out.
and that's why, from my vantage point as the state librarian, I would be reluctant to stop that. That's a normal government process. That's a
Right.
normal community process. You're talking with your librarian, you're raising a concern. I was a children's librarian for many years and I had lots and lots of conversations like that.
Yeah.
And they sometimes ended comically, you know, the mom is upset that there was a swear word on page 52 and the kid kind of chuckles. Mom, you used that word the other day in the car. You know, some of them can be a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
but they can also be serious. A child's reading something that the parent didn't expect them to pick up,
Yeah.
and they're having a conversation the mom or the dad didn't plan for. And so thinking it through and engaging that parent more and helping to select books, getting more advice and recommendations from the librarian.
Right.
The point is you want everybody to be able to make the decisions locally for their own family.
Yeah.
So you need a broad variety of materials. You definitely we would definitely as librarians like to see parents involved in their kids reading and supporting them and having that selection for them. But what's good for this family may not be good for that family. And both families deserve to have books at the public library or at the school library that represent them and their views and their perspectives.
It's a great plan.
So we're definitely, the working group was in favor of the codification of a requirement in statute for public libraries and the section that pertains to public libraries. The school dynamic is a little bit more complex with federal involvement, and we really focus primarily on public libraries as far as the requirement that they have a policy. But certainly there's a recommendation that every library have that policy. And I know that there's different legislation that's been proposed around policies of reconsideration and selection for school libraries. And I'm reaching out to the committees that have heard those bills to see if they would like to hear from me and my state librarian. One of the libraries that it's really important has a robust selection and reconsideration policy is actually your own state library. And our team is working on revamping it and bringing it up to date now and really thinking about it in terms of those First Amendment rights, public accommodation rights, and civil rights. So there's one area that was a little bit interesting to delve into a bit. Right now in Vermont, if a kid is over the age of 16, their library record is confidential. Their public library record is confidential. This is just about public libraries, not about school libraries, which tie in with a different federal set of laws. But if a youngster is a middle schooler, they're 12 years and up, their library materials records are not confidential. And at first that sounds maybe like it's okay, but the challenge is that in Vermont, there are health laws that pertain to youth between those ages of 12 and 16. And there are a lot of really important decisions that a child can make, including treatment for drug or alcohol abuse or addiction, including sexual reproductive health related things, mental health. And the kids can't access that information without their parents seeing that they checked out those books. So the working group recommended lowering the age of confidentiality to 12. Yes.
One question about the confidentiality piece. Does the lack of confidentiality also apply to what's researched on the computer in the library?
It typically would not. The library itself doesn't have a record of that.
Okay.
When you're using a computer at a library, it's typically set up so that it's kind of wiped clean between each user, and the library is not retaining that. But there is a portion later on, and I'll just skip to it now, that actually dovetails a little bit with what your last presentation was about, but is more expansive. The working group was also recommending that the legislature look at data protection and privacy cookie laws, similar to what they have in the EU and in California, really thinking about it in terms of you used to search for information just at your public library, and you went in and you talked to the librarian and she gave you a book and you checked the book out, and that had to be kept confidential. All of the information that you're searching for at home, whether you're a kid, an adult, anybody in between, it's being data mined and they're creating profiles about you. And so we sort of thought of it expansively. We're information professionals. We're kind of aware that that's going on and don't necessarily think it's good for all of us to have all of that private searching information out there. With library databases, The contracts are typically set up so that they must be confidential because it's a patron record. That's a great question.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, so there is the recommendation of lowering the age of confidentiality for public library records to 12. Many states don't have any age at all. But Vermont's age is actually quite high and doesn't really correspond with those of our neighbors and other areas of the country. And given Vermont's health laws, that was the age that the working group went with, because 12 is in the health laws, it's particularly.
Who recommended that?
The working group.
The working.
Yeah, all of these are recommendations of the working group. And I should clarify too, I am the state librarian, but right now I'm the working group chair. So everything I'm saying is as the working group chair, and I might come in next week and say something slightly different. Don't be confused. So to keep going on page 10, the whole goal of this report is to really find out about how equitable services are at libraries in our country. And the working group identified a number of groups who have less access to libraries and library information resources than the general public. As funding is available, and we recognize that this is a tight funding year, funding is likely not available, but areas for growth in our state would include expanding shared services for Vermonters living with disabilities, including deaf and hard of hearing individuals, for Vermonters living with cognitive disabilities, learning differences, and mental health disabilities. Vermonters who speak languages other than English, we don't have very robust non-English language resources in our state, and it's very challenging. You can get them from outside of the state, but those are a resource we have very few of. The Vermonters who are in our state's correctional facilities also have less access to resources. And Vermonters with mobility disabilities or transportation challenges often have significant limitations on what they can do at the library because they can't get in. There are some more recommendations here about supporting academic success. There were many school librarians who wish to see a position restored to the Agency of Education that would support statewide implementation of school library standards. And there was also a request as funding was available for additional resources, online database resources for the K-12 set. And really importantly, but very easy to update were just some minor changes to statute to really enshrine that not only could the Department of Libraries provide continuing education, but that it shall be required to do so to address the continuing education and professional development of librarians in the state.
Was there an act that required this working group?
Yes, Act 66.
Act 66.
Yeah, 66.
Just
Did it maybe
2021. And just quickly, there was a recommendation to build more robust shared collections at the state level, including increased funding if it were available for ebooks and e-audiobooks. And it was very clear that the interlibrary loan program, which the Department of Libraries administers, is really essential to getting books to all corners of the state and to resource sharing between libraries. So increasing that access.
Are they committee bills?
Okay, so
They're voter draft.
That's right, thank you. Sorry.
that's okay. And then a couple more things. Public safety in public libraries and libraries in general is something that we've been hearing a lot about lately. And the recommendation of the working group wasn't around specific things, but more general in nature, to look at existing laws that apply in schools or other public settings and to see should those apply in public libraries. Sometimes people think they already apply, but sometimes we need to look at the language of them, like the Criminal Threatening Act only applies right now in municipal public libraries and not in appropriate public libraries. And really moving forward when legislation is made for schools, just bearing in mind that it's important that the legislature can consider public libraries. It may not be that the legislature chooses to put public libraries into that, but if you're expecting that the kids from school will be coming to the public library as a group, or there's going to be a certain tone in the library, that would be something for you all to consider. And I know we are at 2:00 right now, so I haven't gotten all the way through it, but I trust that you can all read the rest of the recommendations if you'd like to ask questions.
Anything else that you think flipping through Virginia statute? I mean, a lot of this we will see in the bill, or we have seen.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing I do wanna mention is, page 17, clarity around the governance of public libraries and around the funding. I do think that this is a topic where really, rather than, I just wanted to explain why we did not put a specific number or make a specific recommendation about what funding was needed or who should pay for services in libraries. There is information in the report itself that really looks at the municipal level, libraries of different sizes and benchmarks that nationally against the same size libraries. So you're comparing apples and apples, just from other states. So libraries serving communities under 5,000, under 10,000. Vermont's municipal funding is very low. And, that's impacting the service that people are getting in public libraries. It did not feel like it was within our expertise as librarians to say what the funding level should be per capita. And similarly, I don't believe it's the Department of Libraries expertise to say what that should be per capita. It seems like that's more of a legislative discussion and something that might be, and I'm saying this as the state librarian, when I see that the department will set those standards, that concerns me a little bit, because I don't have expertise in tax structure or funding in that way. My expertise is knowing what library service is the best and kind of striving for it. And the funding, I would love to see the legislature make decisions about that. And there are a couple of things related to the Department of Library statute, and we would be absolutely thrilled to have it say in statute that we must have a collection development policy. We're in the process of updating it anyway. That work was put. And right now, the statute seems to say that I do something that the state librarian or the Department of Libraries is responsible for all information on the website. And that just, the state's websites, nobody's ever asked us what should be going on there. So I think just cleaning that up is important, because our scope in the department is quite large already. And that's something that really has, the information services moved over to 211 for the library. We still do answer reference questions, and we're happy to answer reference questions, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Good job.
Really good job. This is a great report. One of the things I'll ask you to do for Wednesday, probably kick it off with you actually, that continuing, would you be willing to put together a one pager in reflecting on 220?
Okay.
Anything that again, you see that is not present in the bill that you think is key? And then just any revisions at all that you would like to make, that would help structure our conversation. It's always good for us to have the suggested edits on paper.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll have Ledge Council here as well, or at least monitoring committee discussion, so.
Great, so 1:30 on Wednesday.
Is that correct?
Pager, and
1:30 on Wednesday, or we can be,
And any of those.
when you leave, just, you could just give Morgan your contact info.
Okay,
Yes, 1:30 on Wednesday is correct. Great.
thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Really
the
appreciate,
time today.
I really appreciate all the work you put into this.
Thank you. It was actually really, it seemed overwhelming at first,
Yeah, I'm sure.
but as a new person in my role, I found it really helpful to get my bearings and to meet so many people in the group community, so I appreciate it.
Great, great. Thank you. Really great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Okay, let's take 5 minutes and we'll come back. Ms. Garces is here. Our Big Hartman.
They will be online.
Online.
They're not feeling well.
Okay, great. So
Sure.
you get the chair next.